Have you ever felt like life is carrying you, rather than you carrying life? Like you're walking through each day, weighed down by invisible burdens, old memories, relationships that no longer bring joy, or possessions that once held meaning, but now only take up space. These things, though harmless on the surface, quietly accumulate and steal your peace. Before you know it, they've become mountains that block your path, leaving you tired and overwhelmed. But what if I told you that true freedom lies in letting go? In the profound wisdom of the Buddha, we are reminded that life is impermanent, and the key to lasting peace is releasing what no longer serves us. We are invited to step lightly, to embrace simplicity, and to live authentically without the weight of unnecessary attachments holding us back. Today, I'm inviting you on a transformative journey, one that could change the way you experience your life. A life free from the emotional clutter that keeps you stuck in the past. A life where you can breathe freely and embrace each moment with clarity and joy. Together, we'll explore 7 things you may need to quietly remove from your life. Things that once let go will create space for peace, growth, and a renewed sense of purpose. Are you ready to step into a lighter, freer version of yourself? Let's discover how the teachings of Buddhism can guide us to release the old and welcome the new with open arms. 1. Other people's drama. The weight of attachment to others' suffering. We all know the feeling. A close friend calls, and suddenly you're caught in a whirlwind of their troubles. Their pain becomes yours, and without realizing it, you're carrying their burden as though it were your own. A child, a sibling, a loved one. They all have their struggles, their worries, their endless waves of drama. And we, out of love, or a sense of duty, take it all on. But as the days go by, we start to feel the weight. We grow weary, emotionally drained, like we're walking through life with an invisible backpack filled with someone else's troubles. But here's the thing. Love does not mean carrying someone else's pain. Buddhist philosophy teaches us about the importance of recognizing our own suffering while understanding that we can't fix others. We can love them deeply, we can listen, we can offer support, but we cannot live their lives for them. True compassion lies in walking alongside someone, not taking on their burdens. There was a woman named Claire who had always been the fixer in her family. Whenever someone was struggling, be it her son, who had trouble with his career, or her brother who was constantly fighting with his partner, she was there, offering solutions, advice, and her time. But over the years, she began to feel like a part of her was slowly being drained away. She couldn't sleep, she lost interest in her own passions, and she felt disconnected from her own life. One day, her daughter, who had been watching Claire carefully, said something that struck her deeply. "Mom, you're always there for everyone, but when do you take care of yourself?" At that moment, Claire realized something powerful. She had been so focused on saving everyone else that she had forgotten the importance of her own well-being. She was so used to carrying the weight of others' problems that she didn't realize it was wearing her down. Buddhist wisdom teaches that we are not meant to carry the suffering of others, but rather to offer them the space to grow and learn from their own challenges. By constantly stepping in to fix things, we rob them of the chance to find their own solutions. So Claire began to shift her perspective. She still loved her family, but she learned to set boundaries. She learned that being there for others doesn't mean solving their problems. It means being present without becoming entangled in their drama. It was a hard lesson, but a necessary one. She found peace in knowing that her love for her family could exist without sacrificing her own peace. The Buddha often spoke of the need for detachment, not in the sense of abandoning those we love, but in freeing ourselves from the attachment to their suffering. When we hold on too tightly to others' problems, we create a false sense of responsibility, believing we must solve everything. But as we detach from the need to fix others, we give them the space to grow, to learn, and to find their own way. And in turn we regain our own peace, which allows us to be there for them in a way that truly supports, not burdens. Imagine if we could all let go of the weight of others' drama. Imagine walking through life a little lighter, not burdened by the endless cycle of problems that aren't our own. The peace that comes from this detachment isn't cold or indifferent. It's filled with deep, compassionate love. A love that lets others walk their own path while we walk beside them. After all, as the Buddha said, you yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection. It starts with loving yourself enough to let go of the weight that isn't yours to carry. 2. The fear of saying no, letting go of the need to please. How often do we find ourselves saying yes when every fiber of our being is screaming no? Maybe it's agreeing to attend a social event that drains your energy, or volunteering for a task you know you don't have time for, just to avoid the discomfort of saying no. The fear of rejection, of disappointing others, of not being liked, is a weight many of us carry. But what we don't often realize is that by constantly saying yes, we are betraying ourselves. We're putting everyone else's needs before our own, and slowly we lose ourselves in the process. In Buddhism, we are taught that true happiness comes from living in harmony with our own values, not from pleasing others. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of balance, of not overextending ourselves for the sake of others at the cost of our own well-being. This doesn't mean we should be selfish or indifferent to the needs of others, but rather we should prioritize our own peace of mind. By saying no when we truly need to, we not only protect our energy, but also live more authentically. Consider the story of Peter, a man in his late 60s who had spent most of his life trying to please everyone around him. His family, his friends, his colleagues, they all knew that Peter could be counted on no matter what, but Peter was exhausted. Every time someone asked for help, he said yes, even if it meant sacrificing his own time, health, or peace. He was always the first to offer a hand, even when it caused him stress or strain. One day, Peter's grandson asked him to help move some heavy furniture, even though Peter's back had been bothering him for weeks. Despite the pain, Peter agreed. A few days later, he was bedridden, unable to move for weeks. The guilt and frustration he felt were overwhelming. It wasn't just the physical pain, it was the realization that by constantly saying yes, he had allowed himself to be in a position where his health was neglected. It was in that moment, lying in bed, that Peter began to reflect. He realized that his inability to say no had become a pattern. He had allowed himself to be caught in the cycle of people-pleasing, always putting others before himself. He feared that if he didn't help, others would see him as selfish or unkind. But as the days passed, Peter began to understand the true nature of self-care. He realized that he had the right to protect his own well-being, just as much as anyone else. The next time his family asked him for help, Peter surprised himself. He said no with kindness but without guilt, and the world didn't end. In fact, he found that his family respected him more, and his relationships became more balanced. He didn't have to give up his peace to be loved. In fact, his ability to set boundaries strengthened his connections with others. In Buddhist teachings, the practice of mindful communication includes speaking our truth. Even when it's uncomfortable, saying no is an act of mindfulness, an acknowledgement that our time, energy, and peace are valuable. It's an act of love, not just for ourselves, but for others as well. When we say yes, out of obligation. We deprive others of the opportunity to learn how to help themselves. But when we say no, we create space for healthier, more respectful relationships. Just imagine, for a moment, if we could all say no when we need to, without guilt, without fear of rejection. If we could honor our own needs, if we could prioritize our health, our peace, and our joy, what kind of life would we lead? It's a practice, yes, but one that brings great rewards, peace, clarity, and a sense of freedom. Because when we live by our own truth, we free ourselves from the chains of external expectations and the burden of people-pleasing. Remember, the Buddha taught that the path to peace is found in the present moment. The present moment is where we reclaim our energy, where we make choices that honor our well-being. When we say no, we step into our own power, and in doing so, we give others permission to do the same. 3. Nostalgia for who you once were, embracing the present moment. It's easy to get caught in the currents of nostalgia, especially when life feels uncertain. We look back at the years when we were younger, when our bodies felt stronger, when our minds were sharper, when our lives seemed full of endless possibilities. We remember the days when we could move with ease, when our dreams seemed so tangible. But here's the trap. Nostalgia can often be a prison of the mind. The past, as beautiful as it may seem, can prevent us from fully experiencing the richness of the present moment. The Buddha teaches that attachment to the past is one of the causes of suffering. It's natural to feel a sense of longing for the good times we've had. But when we fixate on what has already passed, we miss out on what is here, right now. The present moment is the only place where life truly unfolds. When we cling to the idealized version of who we were, we lose the chance to embrace who we are becoming. Take Sarah, for example. In her early 60s, she often found herself reminiscing about her youth, her energy, her vibrant social life, her career when she felt like she was truly making a difference. But as the years went by, Sarah felt disconnected from the woman she used to be. Her body didn't have the same strength. Her mind wasn't as quick. She would compare her current self to the version of herself she held in her memory, and it made her feel like she was losing something precious. One day, Sarah had an encounter with a friend who had recently started yoga. "It's not about what you used to be able to do," her friend told her. "It's about what you can do now. What are you going to create with the strength you have today?" It was a revelation for Sarah. The idea that her current self still had worth, still had potential, despite no longer being the person she was in her prime, felt freeing. Buddhist teachings emphasize the impermanence of life. Our bodies, our minds, our circumstances, they are always changing. Instead of clinging to what is gone, we can learn to embrace the present with acceptance and gratitude. Sarah decided to stop comparing her past to her present. She stopped wishing for the body she had when she was 25. Instead, she began to focus on what she could do now. She enrolled in a beginner's yoga class, not to reclaim her youth, but to nurture the body she had today. And through that practice, she discovered something powerful: the joy of moving with what she had in the moment. Nostalgia, while often comforting, is also a subtle form of attachment. The Buddha teaches that attachment is one of the root causes of suffering. When we look back at our younger selves with longing, we are attaching ourselves to an image that no longer exists. In doing so, we deny the beauty and potential of the present moment. What if, instead of comparing the present to the past, we embraced who we are now? What if we recognize that every stage of life offers something unique? The wisdom we've gained, the depth of our experiences, the stillness of our minds, these are all treasures that come with age. In the present moment, we are not less than who we were before. We are simply different, and that difference is valuable in its own right. The Buddha once said, Do not dwell in the past. Do not dream of the future. Concentrate the mind on the present moment. The present is where life happens. The past is gone, and the future is unknown. But now is where we can make a choice. We can choose to release the nostalgia that weighs us down and open ourselves to the infinite possibilities that exist in the present. When we let go of the need to compare, we give ourselves the gift of peace. We free ourselves from the tyranny of the good old days and step into the wonder of what's right in front of us. Every wrinkle, every gray hair, every change in our body is a testament to the life we've lived. Instead of mourning the past, we can celebrate the present and the beautiful journey we continue to walk. 4. Emotional dependence on others. Finding freedom in self-reliance. As we move through life, it's natural to look to others for emotional support, especially when we feel vulnerable or uncertain. But there comes a time when our emotional well-being becomes too reliant on others, especially those closest to us. Our children, partners, or friends. We may find ourselves seeking validation from them, hoping they will fill the gaps in our heart. However, this emotional dependence can slowly erode our peace and autonomy, leaving us feeling like we cannot stand on our own without their presence or approval. Buddhist wisdom teaches that true happiness and inner peace come from self-reliance. While relationships are important, they should not be the source of our emotional stability. We are responsible for our own happiness, and it is through cultivating self-love and acceptance that we can find the strength to face life's challenges. We can love others deeply, but we cannot depend on them to complete us. There was a woman named Marissa, a mother of 2 grown children, who had always been deeply involved in her children's lives. As they grew older and began living their own lives, Marissa began to feel a sense of emptiness. She would wait by the phone for her children to call, or she would get anxious when weeks went by without hearing from them. She had always been the one to give love, care, and support. But now, as they became more independent, she was left feeling isolated. One day, Marissa had a conversation with a friend, a woman who had been practicing mindfulness for years. Her friend asked her, "Why do you need them to fill that space? Why can't you find peace in yourself?" At first, Marissa didn't understand. She loved her children dearly, and it felt wrong to want less of them, to not need them so much. But as she reflected, she realized her emotional dependence on her children was actually limiting her. She had neglected her own passions, her own hobbies, and her own sense of purpose for so many years. She had unknowingly placed the weight of her happiness on their shoulders. Buddhist teachings remind us that we are the creators of our own happiness. In the teachings of the Buddha, there is a concept of self-empowerment, that we must look inward for the source of our peace. Marissa began to take steps to reconnect with herself. She joined a yoga class, started journaling, and began nurturing friendships outside of her children. Slowly, she found that her emotional world didn't depend on their constant presence. She was able to enjoy their company more deeply when they did visit, without the pressure of needing them to fix the emotional void she had been carrying. Emotional dependence often arises from the belief that our happiness is in the hands of others. We think that if they love us, if they spend time with us, if they give us validation, then we will feel complete. But as the Buddha teaches, attachment, whether to people, outcomes, or possessions, only brings suffering. When we attach our happiness to others, we give them the power to control our emotional state. But the truth is, no one else can provide us with lasting happiness. It is something that we must cultivate within ourselves. Imagine how freeing it would be if you could find peace, joy, and fulfillment without needing others to validate you. If you could love your family, your friends, and your children, but no longer depend on them for your happiness. The ability to stand on your own 2 feet, emotionally and spiritually, is one of the greatest gifts you can give yourself. By nurturing your own sense of self-worth and independence, you create a deeper, more authentic connection with others. You no longer need to demand that they meet your emotional needs, and instead, you can offer them your love from a place of wholeness. This is true self-love, knowing that you are complete even in moments of solitude, and trusting that your happiness comes from within. In Buddhism, the practice of mindful detachment teaches us to let go of the expectation that others must fulfill our emotional needs. When we allow ourselves to be emotionally self-reliant, we liberate both ourselves and those around us. We love without attachment, and we find peace not in the company of others, but in our own heart. 5. Objects that carry emotional weight. Letting go of the past. How many times have we found ourselves holding on to objects simply because of the memories attached to them? A dusty old book that was once a gift from a friend who's no longer part of our life, a picture frame from a past relationship, or an old sweater that was once a favorite but now only sits in the back of the closet. These objects often carry a weight far greater than their physical presence. We convince ourselves that holding onto them somehow preserves the memory, but in reality, it only keeps us tethered to the past. Buddhist philosophy teaches us that attachment to material things can hold us back from moving forward in life. While it's natural to feel sentimental about certain objects, clinging to them can become an obstacle to inner peace. The past is gone, and as much as we may want to hold on to it, the true treasure lies in the present moment. There was once a man named Henry who had an old violin that his father had passed down to him. This violin had been with him through years of family gatherings, holidays, and special moments. However, after his father's death, Henry could no longer bring himself to play it. He simply couldn't shake the sorrow it stirred in him. Every time he picked it up, he was reminded of his father's absence, and it made him feel like he was losing him all over again. One day, while visiting a friend, Henry noticed that his friend had an old guitar in a corner of his living room, gathering dust. Henry remarked, "That guitar looks like it has a lot of stories behind it." His friend smiled and said, "Oh, it does." But I realized one day that by keeping it around and not using it, I was holding on to the past. It was time for me to move forward. That comment stayed with Henry. As he reflected on his own violin, he realized that he wasn't honoring the memory of his father by keeping the violin untouched in his closet. Instead, he was keeping himself stuck in a place of sadness and longing. The memories of his father lived in his heart, not in the violin. It was time to let go of the object that had become a source of pain and open space for new experiences. The Buddha teaches us that attachment to material possessions, especially those linked to past experiences, can weigh us down. We hold on to them as a way of trying to preserve moments that can never be relived. However, by doing so, we miss out on the richness of the present. In Buddhist practice, we are encouraged to cultivate a sense of non-attachment. This doesn't mean we should discard everything, but rather that we should approach our possessions with awareness, letting go of those things that no longer serve us. Henry decided to donate his father's violin to a local music school, where it could be played and appreciated by a new generation. In doing so, he let go of the emotional burden it carried and created space for his own healing. The violin, once a symbol of sorrow, became a symbol of generosity and the joy of passing on something meaningful. Imagine the freedom that comes from releasing objects that no longer serve a purpose. The physical clutter we accumulate often reflects the emotional clutter we hold on to. When we clear our space, we clear our hearts. Letting go of possessions that are tied to the past allows us to create room for new experiences, new memories, and new joy. Buddhism teaches us that we are not defined by our possessions. What matters is the quality of our mind, the clarity of our intentions, and the purity of our hearts. By letting go of things that no longer serve us, we make space for what truly matters. We are no longer bound by the past. Instead, we can move forward with a lighter heart and a more open mind. As you reflect on the objects in your life, ask yourself, do these items bring me peace? Do they connect me to my present self? If not, perhaps it's time to let go. Releasing these attachments is not about erasing the past. It's about freeing ourselves from the weight of it. And in that freedom, we can fully embrace the present moment and the life that awaits. 6. Relationships that drain more than they give. Choosing uplifting connections. As we move through life, we often accumulate a network of relationships. Some are filled with joy, laughter, and mutual respect, while others, though not overtly toxic, slowly begin to drain our energy. These relationships might not scream danger, but over time, they take more than they give. Maybe it's the friend who only reaches out when they need something but disappears when you need support, or the family member who criticizes your choices, leaving you feeling small and unappreciated. These kinds of relationships, even if not harmful on the surface, can have a lasting impact on our mental and emotional health. Buddhist teachings emphasize the importance of surrounding ourselves with people who uplift us, who inspire us, and who help us grow. The Buddha often spoke of the power of Sangha, the community of like-minded individuals who walk the path of wisdom, compassion, and peace. When we invest in relationships that nourish our spirits, we find strength and joy. But when we allow relationships that drain us to persist, we are essentially feeding our own suffering. Consider the story of Maya, a woman in her mid-50s who had a close friend named Olivia. Olivia was always in crisis. Whenever Maya saw her, Olivia would have some new drama, a fight with her partner, an issue with her job, or a conflict with another friend. While Maya loved Olivia and wanted to be there for her, she found herself feeling emotionally exhausted after every conversation. Olivia would often ask Maya for advice, yet never seemed to follow it. Instead, Olivia would call again the next week, with the same problems, asking for more support, but offering nothing in return. Maya began to notice how these one-sided interactions left her feeling drained and unmotivated. She would spend hours on the phone with Olivia, only to feel empty afterward. It wasn't that Maya didn't care for her friend. It was that Olivia's constant need for attention and validation was preventing Maya from focusing on her own well-being. One day, Maya sat with this realization, reflecting deeply on the Buddhist teaching that our happiness is influenced by the people we surround ourselves with. She asked herself, how can I continue to give from an empty cup? How can I offer love and support if I don't take care of myself first? This question led Maya to a difficult but necessary decision: to set boundaries with Olivia. Maya decided that she could no longer be available to Olivia at the expense of her own peace and energy. She gently communicated her need for space, explaining that while she cared deeply for Olivia, she needed to focus on her own life. At first, Olivia was hurt, and Maya felt a pang of guilt. But over time, Maya found a sense of liberation in reclaiming her emotional energy. She began to prioritize friendships that were mutually supportive, that lifted her up rather than drained her. Buddhism teaches us that we must be discerning in our relationships. Not every connection is meant to last forever, and it is okay to step back from those that no longer serve us. It's not about rejecting people, but about protecting our own peace and creating room for relationships that truly nurture our growth. Just as we cultivate a garden, we must tend to the relationships that help us bloom and weed out the ones that stunt our emotional growth. Think about your own relationships. Which ones leave you feeling energized and inspired? Which ones, though you love the person, leave you feeling drained, insecure, or trapped? Setting boundaries is an act of love, not just for ourselves, but for the other person as well. By honoring our own needs, we create space for deeper, more meaningful connections to blossom. The Buddha often spoke of the importance of right association, surrounding ourselves with those who help us walk the path of wisdom. When we cultivate relationships that support our journey toward peace and enlightenment, we not only enrich our own lives, but also the lives of those around us. If you're finding that some relationships are draining your energy, ask yourself, what am I willing to sacrifice for the sake of maintaining this relationship? If the answer is your peace of mind, then it may be time to reassess that connection. By choosing relationships that uplift and inspire us, we honor both ourselves and those who truly belong in our lives. And in doing so, we create a life filled with joy, support, and mutual respect. 7. The need to justify yourself to others. Living authentically, how often do we find ourselves defending our choices to others? We explain why we've chosen a certain path, justify why we are spending our time a particular way, or try to convince others of our decisions. Whether it's the career we've chosen, the lifestyle we're leading, or even the way we spend our time, there's an underlying pressure to explain ourselves, to gain approval from others. But the truth is, constantly justifying ourselves is exhausting and, more importantly, unnecessary. In Buddhist teachings, we are reminded that our journey is deeply personal, and the only validation we need is from within. The Buddha taught that to live authentically is to follow our own truth, free from the need for external approval. The more we seek the validation of others, the less we are able to hear our own inner voice. And in that silence, we lose the connection to our true self. Let's look at the story of Alice, a woman in her late 50s, who had spent most of her life trying to meet the expectations of those around her. She had chosen a career in law, not because it was her passion, but because it was expected of her by her family. They had always envisioned her as successful, working in a prestigious firm, making a name for herself. But deep inside, Alice had always longed to be an artist, to paint, to create, to express herself through her art. Yet every time she tried to pursue her passion, she felt the weight of her family's expectations pressing down on her. "Why don't you settle down and focus on your career?" they would ask. "Why waste your time on something as impractical as painting?" For years, Alice kept her dream locked away, choosing the safer path. But one day, during a quiet moment of reflection, Alice realized she was living for everyone but herself. She had spent her life justifying her choices to her family, her friends, and even to herself. She had allowed their opinions to shape her reality, and in doing so, she had lost touch with the woman she truly was. Inspired by the teachings of the Buddha, Alice decided to step into her authenticity. She realized that her life, her decisions, and her happiness were hers to define. It was time to stop justifying her choices to others. She enrolled in an art class, started painting again, and slowly began to embrace the life she had always dreamed of. At first, the fear of judgment lingered. She wondered what people would say. Would they think she was foolish for giving up a stable career? But over time, Alice began to feel a profound sense of peace. By letting go of the need to justify herself, she found a freedom she had never known. Buddhism teaches us that the desire for approval is a trap that keeps us from living authentically. When we seek external validation, we give up our power to define ourselves. The Buddha spoke often about non-attachment, the idea that we must release our attachment to the opinions of others in order to live freely. When we no longer feel the need to explain ourselves, we reclaim our sovereignty. Imagine for a moment what your life would look like if you stopped justifying your choices to others. What if you could live your truth, unapologetically, and make decisions based on what feels right for you, not based on what others think? The freedom that comes with this is not just liberating, it is empowering. We are each on a unique journey, and only we know the path that aligns with our deepest desire. The next time you feel the urge to justify yourself, whether it's for a career change, a personal decision, or a life choice, ask yourself, why do I feel the need to explain myself? If the answer is to gain approval or avoid judgment, remind yourself that your life is yours to live. You don't owe anyone an explanation. The Buddha said, "You yourself, as much as anybody in the entire universe, deserve your love and affection." This includes the love and respect you give yourself by living authentically. When we stop explaining ourselves, we stop giving others the power to define us. We take back our autonomy, and in doing so, we step into a life of peace, freedom, and self-respect. By letting go of the need to justify ourselves, we allow ourselves to live truthfully, in alignment with our values, without fear or guilt. Conclusion: letting go is an act of liberation. Letting go is not about abandoning the people or things we hold dear. It is, instead, an act of liberation, freeing ourselves from the attachments that weigh heavily on our hearts, the fears that hold us captive, and the expectations that confine our true essence. The Buddha's teachings offer us a timeless truth. Life is impermanent, and true peace arises when we embrace this impermanence. When we allow ourselves to release what no longer serves us, we create space for what truly matters, the freedom to live fully, authentically, and with intention. As we let go of the 7 things we've explored, other people's drama, the fear of rejection, nostalgia for a past that no longer exists, emotional dependence, objects that tie us to a memory, draining relationship, and the constant need to justify ourselves, we make room for something much more precious, the present moment. It is in the present that we can truly be ourselves, where we can engage with life as it unfolds, without the burden of unnecessary weight holding us back. The present is where life is alive, where peace is found, and where the freedom to grow exists. So I invite you, dear friends, to reflect on this. What is it that you need to release in your own life? What is holding you back from stepping into the life you truly deserve? The Buddha once said, "Let go, and you will find freedom." You don't need to carry the mountains that seem to be in your way. You are meant to climb them. And in climbing, you will find not just the summit, but peace along the way. I hope today's journey has offered you the wisdom to recognize that letting go isn't a loss, it's a gateway to freedom. The path to peace begins with the simple yet profound act of releasing what no longer serves you. Thank you for joining me today on Quiet Wisdom. If you found value in these teachings, I encourage you to subscribe and turn on notifications so you can continue to explore the wisdom that brings clarity and peace to your life. Remember, each step you take toward letting go is a step closer to living a life of true freedom and authenticity. May you find peace in the present moment and the strength to let go of whatever holds you back.